All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Multiblind podcast, where still haven't figured out what kind of format I should be following. Apologies if you watched the last one. Realized after uploading it, I just cut it halfway through, and I don't know what's happened to it, but I can't fix it, and to be honest, not enough people are watching this for me to care overly much. It's fun to do, but we'll figure the rest out if more people start giving it a watch. We're back in Poznan this month. Basically, I didn't get to another competition in time. So this is just the second attempt from the competition in Poznan. So last time we were talking about just the interesting thing about, like, if a country or a culture gets really good at something, like what you can learn from that. I'm not going to revisit that a huge amount because we already did it. But this time I'm going to talk a little bit more about my training that I was doing. So I made a video that was all about practicing double, and I'm going to talk about that today because I think there's some interesting thoughts and insights into the world of, like, skill transferability that I can offer. But first, gonna address the fact that I didn't get to another competition, and that's kind of a bummer. So I kind of set myself a target for the last couple of years, was that I can get myself to one competition per month. That's felt like a good amount. You know, if you are going to competitions every week, you definitely build your experience of competing pretty well, but I find it hard to taper and shape your training plan to something that's actually gonna see you improve. Like, it's really hard. If I decided at one point I'm gonna learn 3-style, it's gonna take me more than a month to actually learn that. And if I'm going to a competition every single week, when is the point where I go, okay, cool, I'm going to stop using M2 or Turbo as I was using? Anyone else use that? I don't think I've come across anyone else who uses Turbo or used Turbo as like a blind solving method. If you've not heard of it, it was basically the idea that you would just learn algorithms for all of the top layer cases as like what the commutators would be, and then you just kind of made sure that all of your setup moves moved your pieces to the top. So for example, you would have, or maybe not even the top layer actually, just the UF UR and UL, or LU and RU slots. You would just have algorithms that would swap those pieces about, and I found it really useful because I find it really hard to understand cubing methods in general. Like, people with a stronger math background will say, like, oh yeah, commutators, like you're just doing a setup move, swapping two pieces, undoing the setup move, swapping those pieces back. I kind of understand that, but I really have trouble figuring that out in my head, possibly because I don't have a very strong visual memory in general. But something like Turbo was simple enough that it let me learn all of the 3-style edges just by adding individual commutators one at a time. So, you know, once I had the Turbo method, then I could just add little bits as I went, and the only big difficulty was when I switched from using Puckman corners to using 3-style corners. That kind of messed up things like parity a little bit. But yeah, I quite liked it. Everyone says it's not very efficient, it's not very good. To be honest, I much preferred it to M2. I never switched to M2 because I found it was just a better method for me. And so, curious to know if anyone else feels the same. Anyway, that was a big tangent. We're talking about doing one competition a month, and yeah, basically, when you're learning new algorithms, new skills and stuff, I feel like a month is a good amount of time where you can be learning, different subsets of different things. And then when you know, okay, I'm going to try and put this in a competition next month, then at least you've got 3 weeks to start practicing hard, replacing your old method with your new method. And if that means you're going to suck for 3 weeks, then you've at least got enough time to try and build it back up to a point where your times aren't going to go down so far in the competition. So if you're doing it every week, obviously, I guess it probably doesn't matter to you as much that your times are going down, because next week there's another comp, and you'll just see it build back up again. So maybe there's an advantage in that. I would just say my way is cheaper. I also like the idea of having 3 weeks, 2 weeks of solid kind of training things as difficult as you can make them, a week before the competition, which is actually trying to run things under competition settings. So for Multiblind, for example, the 2 weeks when I don't have a competition coming up, I'll usually be doing 64 in multi. That doesn't go very well, but I use it to kind of increase the speed of my memo. It's like 64 times where you've got to try and rush a 10-second memo, and obviously if you're getting like 5 reviews of each one, actually 64 times 5, which again, already said I don't have a mathematical capabilities or English apparently. So yeah, that's 5 times 60. Who knows, 300 or something. In 1 hour, if you're just doing 300 10-second rush memo, you're going to get good at that pretty quick. So I'll do like 64, 40, and nowadays actually that's it, just 64 and 40. When it gets to the week of the competition, then I will be wanting to train the numbers that I'm actually trying to achieve. So I'll be going for 30, I'll be going for 18. With the 18, I'll usually drop the time limit and try and do it in the national record time, which is about 48 minutes at the moment for Ireland. And when it's 30, just within the hour, but I'll change the way I'm training. So, there's crowd noise is a big thing that tends to distract me. So I've started listening to crowd noise as I train, just like a YouTube people audience background type thing going on. And that really sucks. But knowing that I only have to do it for the 1 week, and then when I get to the competition, actually everything feels nicer. I don't get so distracted by that kind of thing. That kind of does me all right. And then the week after the competition, that's a time to kind of like taper things off a little bit, just like have a more chilled out week. Train if you want to train, if you don't want to train, or if you just don't feel good, like depending on how the competition goes. Sometimes if you have a really good competition, you want to relax a bit more. If it sucked, you might want to train a bit more, or you might need to just like rest and let it kind of wash off you. It just depends on what kind of mood takes you, and I find that kind of like little sliding scale works really nicely for me, and it means that I constantly have something to be motivated for. However, as I said, this month didn't get to a competition, um, and that was kind of for a number of reasons. So, big one is financially. I moved from London to Belfast in November, and obviously with my kind of work, I do a lot of work in person, so where I actually need to be there. So obviously all the work that I had in London was now gone. But I also do a lot of my work online, and the biggest region where I get most of that work happens to be in the US. And just coincidentally, at the start of the year, when the USA got a new president, lots of crazy fun stuff seemed to happen to the stock market, and a lot of the people that I was seeing as clients kind of freaked out, wanted to pause work and things like that. So I ended up with two kind of pretty big blows to my financial situation, and that meant that finances just aren't as good. I can't necessarily guarantee myself I can go do things like compete. Obviously, go into a competition, you're going to play for flights, accommodation, entry fee, you're going to pay for food while you're there, but also you got to miss out a certain number of days of work as well. So like a 2-day competition, usually I'm traveling the day before, traveling the day after, so that's 4 days I can't work. Competitions are on the weekend, and when you're doing work, I wouldn't say primarily, but like 50-50, half the people I work with have day jobs, and half of them are kind of athletes, performers, actors, or something like that, where they do it as their job. But a lot of the time, the weekend is the attractive slot for booking in sessions. So kind of just had to have a bit of a reality check and say, okay, well, you maybe aren't going to be able to do this every month until things pick up. So this month has mostly been about like figuring out ways to keep myself motivated when I have kind of lost the big motivating factor for my training. Like when I know there's a competition coming up, it's if you wake up and you're not feeling it and it just feels like, yeah, I don't want to do it today, it's quite hard to do that when you know that you've only got like those 2 weeks of proper training. And when I say 2 weeks, I don't usually do anything on the weekend, so that's just 10 days. So as soon as I say to myself, I feel like having a day off, I'm telling myself I feel like losing 10% of my gains, my potential gains from the training that I'm going to do. And when it's 10%, that makes it quite easy to argue with yourself, like, what are you doing? You paid for this competition. You're going to be out a lot of money. You're going to really hate yourself if you don't do as well as you potentially could. And so, yeah, when you're sitting there having a bad day, it's much easier to talk yourself into it when everything is built up and geared towards you have to do this because you already booked the competition in. Now it's kind of been every 2 months, and now that we're in May, actually, I don't even know if I'll get to another one until the Irish Championships. So, yeah, it's sort of that up in the air thing of like, yeah, when are you going to train? You don't necessarily have to. Sure, you'll get better faster, but even that, you don't know for sure. Like, you haven't ever tested what having more rest days or whatever would do. And yeah, then that's kind of just been the thing of like, what is gonna keep motivation going, keep me at it. And right now, I don't think I can say I've found the answer. I am looking at some other things like that maybe could be quite cool that I haven't thought to look at before this. So now that I'm in Belfast, one of the things I really want to do is set up like a cubing meetup type group. I know that lots of universities have a cubing society, but I would like to have something that's more just inclusive for everybody. Maybe start cubing clubs for like kids and things like that. I've spent 20 years, more than 20 years, training, teaching kids, so that's kind of something I'm looking into. And yeah, I guess just seeing, is there any other aspects of my business where I can start gearing things more towards cubers? So if I can't be attending the competitions, you know, maybe I can be getting more cubers involved, helping to teach them, train them, analyze solves, whatever. So that's kind of what's on the cards. If you've seen my upload, I don't know whether it's going to be last week or the week before, where I posted a solve analysis. That's going to be one of the things I'm kind of interested in doing. So just seeing if I can help other people with the kind of work that I do for other athletes or other people in pain or actors or whatever clients I tend to work with. Seeing if we can make some kind of a difference happen in cubing, because I find the difference really great for me. I really want to see now, can I actually let this happen with other people? So that's where I'm at with motivation. The other thing, I guess, given that this is a 30 cube attempt, when it comes to competitions, another thing, even when I do decide I can afford it, one of the conditions now that I've set myself is that there needs to be 2 multi-solves at least in the competition if I'm going to attend, or it's got to be so cheap and easy to get to that doesn't matter to me. That's one of the things with multi that's so kind of crazy, is just the idea that, you know, it needs to be pretty damn perfect every single time. And I find this really interesting because the kinds of people I know who would geek out on something like Multiblind, like the kind of people who would be up for some kind of memory endurance challenge, some kind of skill learning that's all about, you know, endurance and figuring out how to process very large sets of information and stuff like that. They are not the same kinds of people that enjoy high pressure performance, and I think that's sort of an interesting thing that's maybe reflected in cubing. Like, my background originally was circus, and originally was gymnastics. That's all about trying to be as perfect as possible, but the caveat is that it's totally impossible. Like, there's no way you can get a score of 10 out of 10. And the one time when somebody did get a 10 out of 10, they said, hey, that's not a good achievement. We just got the rules wrong. And then they changed the rules to make it even harder to get a perfect score in gymnastics, to the point where now it just shouldn't be possible, because you're getting 2 separate scores. One is for how difficult something is, the other is for how many kind of deductions you get for it. So the more perfect you are, actually, the less likely you are to win, because somebody else is going to try something that's more difficult. And scoring system's kind of complicated, but the whole idea is that it's about striving for perfection when perfection is impossible. Maybe it's a little bit like Multiblind. Like, obviously, you can go for consistent and perfect with, you know, n out of n solves, but then every cube you add increases the likelihood that that one's not going to be done. So yeah, I guess there's a little bit similar, but I moved from gymnastics into circus, and that's where I got most of my life experience, performance experience, sports and training experience. Even though circus isn't a sport, I definitely learned more about sport through circus than I did through gymnastics, especially how to do it in a healthy way. And the thing with circus is that if you become a circus performer, you're doing this as a job, so there's not really room for mistakes or errors. Like if you create a gymnastics routine, you go into the competition knowing full well that you might make a mistake. You know, you're going to get deductions, you might fall, that's going to be a huge deduction, and it doesn't matter because then you're just going to pick yourself up and rehearse for the next competition. But if somebody books your circus act, you better not be making any mistakes. Like, that's not something that your employer or whoever's hiring you is gonna want to see. Like, every time you show up, it is expected 100% that you're going to do a good job. You're not going to mess anything up. You're definitely not going to hurt yourself, because that's going to cause major issues for them. And yeah, you just kind of have to bring your A game, and if you can't guarantee that, then you got to make everything easier. And that's kind of the mentality that I've always brought into things like sport now. So you get the athletes that are like, go hard or go home, and for me, consistency is the much more important thing. So when I get to something like multi-blind, I always joke, like 10 points just seems to be the curse that I'm stuck with. Like when I was my second or third ever multi-solve was 10 out of 10. Then my next one was 11 out of 12. Then when I tried to bump it up to 14, I was getting 12 out of 14 just constantly. Like, almost every solve would have been 12 out of 14. Then as I bumped that up to 18, then most of the time then it's 14 out of 18. So I just seem to be very much stuck on this consistent 10-point thing that I struggle to break. Even with 30, once I get good at it, I imagine 20 out of 30 is just going to be a constant for me. But yeah, the people I know in circus would absolutely hate these kinds of endurance things, and I find it interesting that I even enjoy something like multi-blind at all, because it feels like I have that need for the consistency, but the consistency is so hard or next to impossible to get when you're constantly trying to push yourself harder than you were previously able to get. So yeah, don't know where exactly I was going with that. But that's what I think. I think the consistency thing is just a strange beast. So yeah, what was I going to talk about in this episode? Yeah, talking about training. So if you've seen, a while back now, posted a video about skill transferability, and basically I tried to I tried to improve my Megaminx times. I quite like the idea of just like random challenges and random restrictions. So the thing I wanted to look at, because I did a video a while back on peripheral solves, that is 100% my kind of top video I've ever put out. If I could give one thing that I think every cuber would benefit from, it is peripheral vision training. Like, there's other things that I think would benefit some people a whole lot more, but the one thing that consistently I think every single cuber should train that they probably aren't looking at training right now is peripheral vision training. The less you need to move your eyes in a solve, the more energy your brain's going to save, the easier it's going to be for you to focus. If you just imagine it, like when you see one specific picture, it's easier to sit and figure out what's going on than if you're constantly being shown lots of different bits of the same picture. So if your eyes are really good at just taking in more information without needing to jump your eyes to another spot, then you're going to be able to react to that information a lot quicker. When you see like the animals that have the best vision, most of the time they don't have a whole lot of movement going on. So like birds, probably some of the most reflexive and reactive animals to their visual system. Like when a bird's flying, they don't necessarily move their eyes a whole lot because their eyes have just got good at picking up huge amounts of information all at once. And then the kind of caveat to that is they also have more reflexes, more built-in reflexes, because they don't have to discern, is this X or is it Y? They're always used to looking at the exact same picture rather than like a close-up or like a individual bit of it. So when they see something that means, hey, you should duck or dive or dodge, these of dodgeball, then you just automatically, instinctively do it. You don't need to think about it. And the same happens with athletes as well, is like, obviously, the faster your eyes can move, the better. The faster you can look at what you need to be looking at. But once you're looking at it, the other really important thing is how much information can you take in at once. So if you get better at being able to become aware of more stuff in your peripheral vision, if you want to practice it, like just take a painting or something, look dead at the center, and then try and just describe everything that's going on in that painting as quickly as you can. That's probably the easiest way. Or watch my video, and I'll talk about like the things I used for cubing specifically. So already did that one, but I wanted to see, this comp had Megaminx coming up. I wanted to see if I could get my Megaminx times down in a similar way. I didn't want to just do a peripheral solve again, so figured, is there anything else that is kind of like peripheral training? And last year in Poland, when we went to the Polish championships, got to play a game called Double for the first time, which is like a little card game with different pictures on it, and every card has one picture on it that's the same as the next card in the deck. Like, no matter what card comes next, each pair of cards has one image that is the same, and never more than one. It's really cool. If there's videos on like the mathematics behind it, which is really fun to watch, of like how they actually made it so that you can get cards where anytime you compare any two cards, there's always one image the same and never more than one. But yeah, the idea is you basically just work your way through the deck, usually against another person, trying to call out, you know, which card is the same on yours versus the next one. And I could kind of see that like the way that it worked was very much the same as how the peripheral solve works on a cube. Like, if you're trying to look at every single individual picture one at a time, it's going to take you a long time because you've got 8 images on one card and then you've got 8 images on the other card. So you got to look at image number 1 and then look at 8 different times at another image to see if they match. Then you got to look at image number 2 and then another 8 times, so that's 16, and then number 3 another 8 times. Notice how I stopped there because I'm not good at math. But if you could just kind of zone out and just sort of stare at the whole picture all at once, then you can kind of see, because obviously if there's 2 red pictures on the cards, that's going to jump out to you, or if there's 2 things that are similar shapes and things like that. So the more you can just kind of hold your focus on one point and just let your peripheral vision figure stuff out, the quicker you're able to find the correct shape or correct picture, assuming that your peripheral vision is good. So if you've got terrible peripheral vision, it's still going to take ages and ages and ages. But when your peripheral vision gets better, then suddenly you find you're able to speed through the deck, and it's something that tires out really, really quickly. That was like one of the surprising things when I was playing it, is like you do it once, and then the second time you do it, your brain is just done, doesn't want to play anymore. And I guess we don't notice that as much in cubing, because as we progress through a solve, the cube is becoming more and more solved. So actually we need to rely on our peripheral vision less as time goes on. So that's probably why. But yeah, I decided I was going to use double to see, like, does training something in a similar realm that isn't exactly the same actually help you improve at the thing that you're trying to get better at. And that idea of skill transferability is a pretty big one that gets talked about a lot. Like, I know lots of athletes that swear by, you're doing powerlifting, so you need better grip for your barbell. Well, instead of just training grip on the barbell, you're going to go take a climbing course, or you'll go train grip strength in some other way, or maybe you'll even do something that trains other aspects of grip. So it could be like throwing and catching, which is nowhere near the same intensity as what you need, but it is similar muscles that you're activating. You're just doing it in a completely different way, and they will report that, okay, well, when I come back to my powerlifting training, I get a lot better. And then the weird thing is, when you go to look into like the more dry neuroscientific research, that research sort of suggests, well, that probably shouldn't be happening. That shouldn't be the case, because we know pretty conclusively, or we've got pretty solid evidence, that when the brain is learning, it doesn't learn in a roundabout way. It learns exactly the thing that you're training. If you imagine, like, the most basic example of Pavlov's dog, where the scientist trained dogs to salivate every time they heard a bell. So he'd like ring a bell and give them food, and then ring a bell, give them food, and eventually the dog learns that when you hear the bell, food's going to come, so it starts to produce saliva to get ready to digest the food when it hears the bell. And apparently, when he started bringing the dogs to other places to demonstrate this, he didn't actually get it to work. That, they would ring the bell, but the dogs wouldn't salivate, because they weren't in the same environment. They weren't in the same room, and so everything was exciting to them, and they hear the bell, but it's not in the same context as they had it before. So their brain is also going, well, why would this be the same? Why should we act on our learned responses in one situation when we're evidently not in the same situation right now? And obviously that's several layers detached from how humans learn and things like that. But when it comes to like most science on how neurons learn and like muscle memory and all that stuff, all of the time they say that, it actually really does matter how specific you are. If you want, so let's use a cubing competition, for example. If you want to get a multi-blind world record, and your comp has your multi-blind round at 5 p.m, well, you're probably going to do better if you train at 5 p.m. every day, because your hormone cycle is going to be different depending what time of day it is, and that's going to affect how your brain interprets things. Your energy levels, your body temperature and all are probably going to be different. If you're going to do the competition in a kind of big snooker hall like this one was, then even better if you could do your training in a snooker hall, or maybe a snooker hall doesn't need to be that precise, but a similarly sized building. But maybe even, if there's chalk in the air and stuff like that, and you're going to be breathing that in, maybe that's going to be part of it. But like all of the different things in the environment, you want them to be as similar as possible. So if the cubes are going to be scrambled differently, then obviously they stay scrambled differently. But wearing the same clothes, wearing the same ear defenders, using the same blindfold, doing it at the same time of day, eating the same food, all of that stuff will help you learn this thing much better. And when the neurons actually grow and develop and rewire themselves, the more things that they have that are always the same to go on, the stronger the more rigid and resilient that structure of like neural connections are going to be. So that, you've got this kind of little divide between those two arguments. And one argument is that everything should be as specific as possible. So if you're training double, you're going to just get better at double. You're not going to get better at Rubik's Cubes because they're not the same thing. And yes, you are using your peripheral vision, so you need to widen your peripheral vision, but there's no guarantee that even if you get better peripheral vision to play double, there's no guarantee that your brain is going to then give you that better peripheral vision and work out how to transfer it. So it's also got to figure out, well, this is peripheral vision for recognizing shapes. Is that the same as peripheral vision for recognizing triangles with colors on them, like there would be for Megaminx? And I think the most fun part about it is there seems to be good enough arguments for both, and it does seem that there is some level of transferability of skills if you go about it the right way. So the other, I don't know, research, but the other person that's interesting to look into when it comes to skill transferability and when it comes to learning is somebody called Barbara Oakley. She has run a course called Learning How to Learn, written a book also called Learning How to Learn. It's part of a university module, I believe, but basically Barbara's done a whole lot of work on this idea of like focused learning as well as what she calls diffuse learning. And the idea is that, yes, the brain does learn better from the more specific you can be about the skills that you're trying to acquire, but that kind of has a limit to how effective it can be. So she's come up with basically two modes of learning that they have. The focused mode of learning is that mode of everything being really, really specific. And if you imagine having a microscope, so once you decided I'm doing cubes, I'm doing Megaminx, I'm doing Multiblind, whatever it is, my brain wants to figure out everything that is always the same. And that's what it's going to learn is, when I do the Multiblind, are the letter pairs always the same? No. Okay, then I'll ignore that. Are the pictures, the rooms that I go to always the same? Actually, they are in my case, although people are suggesting to me that they shouldn't be. So I'm going to pay attention to the rooms. The rooms are important. We're going to focus on that. The commutators that you're using, the algorithms that you're using, are they always done in the same way? For me, some of them I haven't figured out how to do them in different grips and things, so I'll do them exactly the same every time. Some of them I don't do exactly the same, so you go, okay, cool, that's more information about what's always the same, what's always not. And that's essentially the focused mode of learning in a nutshell, is basically just everything that's the same, let's figure it out and whittle away everything else. And actually, one of the best ways to train that kind of thing is with, distractions. So if I'm solving a Rubik's Cube, the more different environments that I can solve that Rubik's Cube in, the more it lets the brain realize which bits of the solve are always the same and which bits are always different. So like the turning and what my hands are doing are usually the same, but if I'm doing it indoors versus outdoors versus standing up versus sitting down versus going down a water slide, then it starts to differentiate between all the bits that are unnecessary. So like, to give you an example, if you always cube in the same room at the same temperature, your brain might start to associate that temperature with being important for the cube solve. So then when you go to your next competition and you don't have that temperature, it's too hot or too cold, then you might find that suddenly your brain is not so honed in. Like, you don't feel like you can just act on muscle memory. You feel like you're kind of second guessing yourself an awful lot. Obviously, that's an extreme example. It's probably pretty unlikely that anyone could keep something like the temperature so exactly the same that it would affect them like that. But just as a hypothetical example of how it might work. The thing with the focus mode, however, is, number one, it uses a lot of energy. So, if I gave you the same peripheral vision task with a painting, like we said before, and I said, actually, I don't want you to use your peripheral vision, I want you to use a microscope or binoculars, and then tell me what the painting looks like, but you have to use the binoculars, and you see just this incredibly zoomed in bit, you would have to do, first of all, a hell of a lot more work describing every single segment that you can see, and a lot more work putting all of that information together. So like, the energy that it takes to learn in the focus mode is pretty high. And the second thing is, sometimes when you're focused too far in, it's hard to see what you could be doing differently if you haven't had alternative experiences or alternative things that your brain has gone through in order to be able to like problem solve and figure out a specific hurdle. So, in the binoculars on a painting example, you can describe all the lines, but if you can't work out, it could be a painting of a butterfly, but if you're zoomed in too close, it's going to be very hard for you to be able to relate that those lines should be a butterfly or something else that you actually know pretty well. If you had the ability to zoom out, or if you just knew so much about butterflies that you knew that specific pattern or something is usually like a butterfly, then you'd have that thought of like, okay, I can't tell what this is, but it's that color a little bit like this type of butterfly that I learned about in school. And then your brain is now more open to the possibility that it could be a butterfly. That's where the diffuse mode of learning comes in. The diffuse mode is basically the way that your brain figures out the kind of creativity and problem solving side of things that is also really important to learning. So, if you think of being zoomed in for a long time, you'll get really good at one aspect of a problem, but at some point you then need to zoom out and actually let that hyper-specific bit that you've just worked out filter into all the other things that you've learned. Barbara Oakley, I think, describes it as like a pinball machine. So, you hit a pinball machine into that little bit with all the bumpers on it, and it's bouncing around really, really fast, and that's racking up loads and loads of points, and that's great, but eventually the energy the ball has runs out, and now you've just got to bounce it around the pinball machine until you find another little bit that it can bounce around in. Your brain's ability to learn works in exactly the same way. So when I think about learning peripheral vision for double, and when I think about learning peripheral vision for Rubik's Cubes, while the two aren't exactly the same, so learning one doesn't guarantee I get good at the other. The fact that my brain has worked out how to expand my peripheral vision makes it much more likely that it's going to be able to figure that out when it comes to the other tasks. So if I learn double first and then I go to cubes, if I've learned the ability to widen my peripheral vision once, it's going to be easier the second time. And, it's the same like you see. I've worked with gymnasts for more of my life than any other athlete, and most people kind of herald gymnastics as it is the best possible sport that you can do because it's got the widest amount of movement options. It's the one that forces you to use your body in the widest spectrum of ways. And that's kind of true, but it still doesn't make gymnasts better at other sports than other people. They are a little bit more athletic. They sometimes, if the sport hasn't broken them down too much mentally, they are sometimes also better at learning the basics of new skills, but they're not guaranteed that they're just going to be good at that sport because they were good at one. Just because their muscles can move within the range that a sport requires, it doesn't mean that they will be able to command that at will, but it does mean that they're more likely to be able to figure it out if they've gone through that learning process. The same thing applies with, any other kind of sport or any other thing that your brain's learned in general. If you've got good at one thing, the mental state that it took you to learn that is going to carry with you, and you'll kind of have to figure out how to unlock it in another way, but the fact that you did it once makes it more likely that you can do it again. And that's pretty much exactly what I found with the double training. Like, I started training it right away, and I noticed Megaminx times started to drop very, very quickly. Now, I don't think just training double was the thing. I think when you try to do this like transferability stuff, you need to have a certain amount of salience with it as well. So you need to be consciously thinking about the bit that you're trying to get better at. So I was doing double thinking, I'm trying to open up my peripheral vision, and then I was solving my Megaminx thinking I'm trying to open up my peripheral vision. And I think the real kind of magic was in the fact that both tasks were concentrating my conscious mind on that point, because that's what felt like it was making the times go down. I think I took an average of 100. I think I was just over 2 minutes at the start and got it down to 1 minute 50 very fast. And then kind of what I was predicting would happen, and that did seem to happen, was eventually I started getting good at double, like in other ways. So I was getting good at opening my peripheral vision, and then there was a certain point where opening my peripheral vision wasn't helping anymore. Like, maybe it still would have if I just kept at it, but it didn't seem to be giving me the additional benefit like I would have wanted. And then I started looking at like other little hacks. So I found that when I moved the card, so I was holding one card in my hand and the other one was on the table. So I started using my peripheral vision but moving the card around. One of the things with your peripheral vision is it's really sensitive to movement. So I would start moving the card, and sometimes that would actually make it a lot quicker for me to find the piece. But the thing was, that tactic didn't seem to track well to the Megaminx, and that kind of makes sense. If you're relying on your dexterity at the same time, then that's not necessarily going to help. But the problem is, once you know one thing's helpful, it was really hard not to just keep doing that, rather than finding another peripheral vision thing that would help with double. The other thing that I found was there started to become like certain cards would become more familiar to me. So like there was, if a card had a lot of one type of color on it, then I found that I was actually just memorizing that card. So I was noticing my double times were still going down, but again, it wasn't because I was seeing things quicker. It's because as soon as that orange card comes up, I know all the pictures that are on it. So whatever the card I'm looking at next, now I don't need to look at the orange card. I just need to look at the new card, and that's why I could run through it a lot quicker. So as I started to get better at double, the gains in the Megaminx were kind of tapering off, and I actually think after a while I kind of started getting a bit slower as well, which I don't know, I don't have too many thoughts on. I guess part of that is regression towards the mean. I could have just been getting a bit lucky as well. But I kind of tapered out about 1 minute 48. The cutoff time for this competition was 1:45, so I was kind of going in there hoping that it would work. But unfortunately, just like when I did my peripheral vision video, nerves got the best of me, and it was not to be. So sad, but I guess that's just what happens. And then even worse news was, as soon as I got back home, I uploaded it all onto my laptop, and my laptop crashed out on me. I had done the thing over lockdown, bought the most expensive laptop I could get that was like this laptop tablet hybrid with a touchscreen and everything, because everybody was recommending that was just the best possible thing. Yeah, if you want more tech advice from someone who seems to just constantly be screwing up with their tech, don't do that, because yeah, basically the whole thing is just one big expensive motherboard, and once the laptop wouldn't turn on anymore, basically the replacement parts cost the same as buying the laptop again. So that wasn't fun. Where was I going with that? Anyway, yeah, the double thing, pretty cool, pretty interesting. If I was going to do this again, and I might do this as a challenge next time I got a comp that's got some big cubes in it, I think rather than just choosing double as one thing specifically, I think this like diffuse mode transferable learning thing works best if you expose yourself to loads of things that encourage the one skill you're trying to develop while you're still training the thing you're trying to get better at. So if I want my peripheral vision to get better, then I still want to train Megaminx. I still want to be thinking about opening my peripheral vision and just seeing more things at one time, maybe even doing some of the peripheral solves like I did for the big cubes. But at the same time, I want to then choose not just one thing that encourages opening peripheral vision, because eventually I'm going to get used to that and I'm going to be able to tolerate it and kind of ignore that aspect of it. But I want to choose like maybe 5 or 10 or 100, as many different things as you can. That way, you never actually get the chance to get good at any one of those alternative activities, but you're in that beginning zone where actually, you know, that peripheral stuff would be more useful. So trying to think of what else I could use. Double would be a good example. Where's Wally? Where's Waldo? Those books, or just any kind of like object finding games, crosswords. In the peripheral vision video, I talked about peripheral vision charts where you have to read through, find letters while you're staring at one spot. Schulte tables, which is like little, kind of like a word search, but just a number search. You got to find number 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And yeah, anything like that. One that I've kind of just by proxy been getting into was rally driving games. So, you know, if you have a rally driving video game, obviously you're driving a car, you're looking at all the scenery go by, etc. So peripheral vision is important for that. But at the same time, you're also looking at the pictures of what turns are coming up ahead. So you kind of have to use your vision for several different things, and especially if you choose to drive the car on like manual mode, then you need to look at when you need to be changing gears and stuff like that. So you got to be taking in a lot of visual information at one time. All of those things combined together at the same time as doing the training, I think, has a pretty good chance of being successful. And so that's probably what I would look at doing the next time. Yeah, that's probably all I got to say about double. And that challenge. I think for next time I'm going to look at more stuff on breathing. So I found Multiblind, I don't tend to have nerves too bad. I've got a pretty solid breathing routine I do before most Multiblind solves when I'm able to. And even when I don't, I think I train it so much and I just kind of got used to getting into the zone of it. But when it comes to speed events, I find more recently I've been struggling with like nerves on specific solves. So the connection that I've made is that for quite a few years I was determined I was going to break the world record for Rubik's Cube solved underwater. And I was doing a lot of breath training, and that meant doing a lot of like carbon dioxide tolerance drills. And those drills turned out to be really helpful because when I would go into competition, actually, I'd still be nervous and stuff, or I'd still have, all the chatter in your head like you're gonna have until you're like super proficient with competitions. But it didn't seem to bother my physicality as much. And just over the last year or so, I just kind of ran out of training time. It just became not a priority to keep going with that breath training. And I'm starting to make the connection that might be what's affecting me, or like that's something that I've been missing. So you can probably expect at some point in the near future a few more breathing related videos coming up. And yeah, I think the solve's also not going to last too much longer. On the note of motivation, so this one out of 30, pretty sure I got 6 out of 30, which is a record for me out of 30 in comp. That's the other cool thing, if I get to go to competitions that have 2 multi attempts, it's nice having the one solve where you're trying to do better than you've ever done before points wise, and then the other one where actually you're just at the bottom, you're at like your lowest level of capability and you're just trying to see it increase gradually. And what I'm most looking forward to is the point where they cross over. So eventually I'm going to get, I've kind of decided 17 out of 18 or 18 out of 18 is when I jump it up. And then I'll move to 24. And my hope is by the time I get to the 24 and I start sucking kind of bad at 24, that my 30 attempts have gone up. They've got past the 15 out of 30 mark, and so actually I'm starting to see that actually maybe the 31 is the one that I'm gonna be getting more points in for a little while before it switches. But that's kind of the idea of why I want to do a big number that I'm not currently capable of in the competition. Is when I jumped from 14 to 18, it took so long, it took so many competitions to get to the point where I was getting kind of anything other than a DNF. I think that's true. You can look that up. But eventually, it started to get up there. But now I want to kind of jump ahead of the gun and see what I can get. So that's the solve over, 6 out of 30. Thank you again for making it to the end. If you did get there, I appreciate it. And yeah, see you next time.